Hey, how's it going, everyone? So, this is going to be a little bit of a different video, as you can see. I want to sort of delve into these types of videos where it's essentially going to be like a podcast, if you will. And I just want to sort of sit back and just talk about film and TV. It's called Film Talk, but we're going to be talking about all different kinds of media, mainly film and TV. Possible other things, maybe like some news articles, trailers, anything to do in the entertainment and media space. I want to sort of talk about because I've noticed I have kind of bad ADHD when it comes to trying to stick to a single topic and sort of, following it through to the end, which for me, film and TV, there's never going to be an end. And so I kind of monitored myself throughout the past few months and tried to sort of figure out a constant as to things that I'm doing in my free time and hobbies and stuff like that. And the number one thing all the time is I'm always watching something, whether it be a YouTube video, a TV series, movies, anything like that. I'm always looking at a screen. It sounds bad, which it can be. I also like the outdoors, stuff like that. So, you know, I'd say once a month or so, I might go and, just go outside. And I mean, I go outside more than just once in a month, but like once or twice a month, I actually like try and get out, for at least a half a day and go and just do something, whether even if it's just driving to like a local park or going down by the river or by a lake or something like that. But the big constant that's always been a constant in my life has been watching TV and film. So, this first episode, and I think, so just to give you an idea, this title card you see on screen right now, it's on my computer. See, here's my cursor right here. It's on my computer. So throughout these videos, it's going to be a lot of film talk. Like looking at this screen, I will probably, make some other title cards that essentially look just like this, just different colors, different backgrounds, stuff like that. But since I'm on my computer, I'm able to sort of look at articles on Google Chrome and stuff like that. And the structure I'm trying to go for is this first episode is not going to be like the set structure that I want to follow by, because it's sort of a introductory episode to sort of me and film and TV and stuff like that. But after this episode, I want to try and focus where sort of the first half of the episode, or like at least the first quarter half of the episode, I want to talk about maybe some new movies that have come out or any announcements, trailers, basically anything news related involving film or TV. I want to kind of talk about that. And then I will probably have in the title of the video talking about whether it be like maybe, a certain video I'm talking about just one film or I'm talking about a genre. You get the idea. So without further ado, after that almost 5 minute long intro of talking about these new videos, I figured let's just get right into it. So I have written down a few sort of bigger talking points to kind of kick off this very first video and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of other questions that I didn't think of, but these are sort of like the three that I could kind of think of off the top of my head where I can sort of delve in a little bit. So the first thing I want to sort of talk about is how I got into movies. So I was born in 1995. I am currently 27 years old. I turned 28 in a few weeks or so. And with me being born in 95, a lot of my first memories of TV and film were around the age of 4 to 5. First off, I want to say from my earliest memories, I remember watching television. Being born in the mid 90s, it was sort of a time where TV was a big thing already, but it was just before the internet was getting really big, and so TV was just a big thing in my household. I think I'd say a big part of why television was so big in my life just has to do with, and this isn't a pity thing, because for me personally, I never really got down about this. Maybe a little bit when I was younger. And I do want to mention, I got a couple dogs in my room right now, so if you hear any barking or stuff like that, they're just playing. But anyways, I think I was watching a lot of TV as a young child, around 4, 5, 6 years old, is because, so my parents divorced when I was around 5 or 6, and I still saw my dad, every single weekend, stuff like that. Lived with my mom, but my mom worked during the day up until I was probably 12 or 13, and then she switched over to a third shift. So those early years, I would essentially get home from school. My mom wouldn't be home from work until around 4:30 or 5. And so I would get home, I would, get a snack or maybe make something to eat for myself, and then I would go and watch TV. And that's what I did. I was outside a lot as a kid too, but if I wasn't outside, I was usually watching TV or playing video games. Video games didn't really become a big part of my life until I played like N64 and stuff like that when I was, real young, but I got a PS2 when I was probably 8 or 9 years old, and that's when I really got into like video games and stuff like that. But television was always number one, and films in particular were always number one for me, and so that's what I was sort of gravitated to. And so basically, like I said, if I wasn't outside, if I was inside, I was usually watching TV. Unfortunately for me, I didn't get to experience MTV during its like prime years where they were showing just like music videos and stuff like that. But I did grow up with MTV where they were still showing music videos instead of like ridiculousness nowadays. But yeah. So just growing up, TV was always, a part of my life. I remember growing up, it was, I think the average amount of television sets in a home during the early 2000s, I would say it's probably maybe 2. Probably like 1 in the main living room where everyone watched TV, and then your parents' bedroom, or if you were lucky, your own bedroom. But there was sort of a shift. I think the internet, when it started picking up steam, the internet really shifted how screens are perceived in a home. And so a lot of people were getting computers and stuff like that. So there were more screens. So it felt a little bit more normal. And nowadays, like, so me alone, I've got 5 screens in my bedroom alone. I've got 3 monitors at my desk where I'm sitting right now. I've got I believe, 32-inch screen TV to my left. If I want to have any guests to talk about anything, they sort of have a screen to look at. And then I've got a TV to watch TV when I'm in bed. But in my home, there is a total of, if you're counting laptops, 5 in my bedroom, including a laptop, so 6 in my bedroom. My dad's got a TV in his bedroom with a laptop, so that's 8. And then we've got a 75-inch TV down in the living room. So that's 9 screens of some kind. And that's not including phones in my home. So you could say I watch TV a lot because there's typically a screen within view of me if I'm in my home. And so I love film. I love film so much. I haven't really sat down and taken, an hour or two to really kind of think about why film is so important to me. But I would say the number one thing why I love it so much is because it's sort of an escape. I think that's what most people like watching TV for. They want to laugh, they want to, maybe get scared a little bit, they want to maybe have a cry. And so watching shows and movies, you can get all that without having to leave the comfort of your home, which is really nice. People like comfort and they like accessibility, and nowadays it's nice to have both at the same time. So that's essentially why I like film so much. I'm just sort of looking at my talking points right now. Let's sort of split things up a little bit. So like I said earlier, since I'm on my computer, I'm able to kind of peruse around. So I got a few tabs up on my Chrome page that I want to kind of look at. So the number one thing that I am so grateful for that I found out about, I wish I would have found out about it a lot sooner, but hey, it's whatever, is Letterboxd. So if you don't know what Letterboxd is, I highly recommend downloading the app. Even if you don't watch film or TV a whole lot, it's still worth downloading because it's an app where you basically log your films. So you can log them where you just put a out of 5-star score and that's it. Or you can put your star, you can put your score, and then you can write a review as well. But the main reason why I personally use Letterboxd is to sort of keep track of films that I have watched, and I also like to see how many I have watched within either a month or a year, stuff like that. So, like so far, I've watched 85 movies this year. I would say is maybe above average, but not a lot. There's some people on Letterboxd who have watched over 300, 400 films already, and it's not even Halloween yet, which is insane to think about. And if you guys want to follow me on Letterboxd, just type in ceiling carpet and you'll find me. But yeah, on my Letterboxd, I guess we can just kind of go through and look at a few of my recent films. So yesterday, my dad was cutting the dog's hair, and so I was just kind of relaxing on the couch, and I'm like, because with my dad, it takes him a couple hours to cut both the dog's hair. So I'm like, I'll put on, just a random movie. So I was just kind of browsing, and I came across Dawn of the Dead. I'm like, yeah, I can put that on because I've seen both, but I've seen the Dawn of the Dead remake before, and so it's one of those movies where I can put it on, I can watch it, for 15, 20 minutes, and then, maybe go on my phone, check whatever I need to check for, 5, 10 minutes, and then go back to watching the movie. And I already know sort of the idea of what happens, stuff like that. So it's kind of one of those chill movies for me. I'll talk about my favorite genre in a second. Here, kind of looking at my sort of recent films. You might think I'm into comedy. I love comedies, but it's not my favorite genre. But yeah, I also like watching comedies like this, Bad Teacher. It's just sort of a, kind of raunchy, kind of stoner-ish, just overall funny, comedic movie, stuff like that. But yeah, Letterboxd is a godsend when it comes to anyone who likes film, stuff like that. You can log everything, see how many films you've watched over a period of time. And then they also have lists that you can favorite and whatnot. So like this one is 1980s horror, 485 films. And so somebody made this list. It's all 1980s horror films, and you can just sort of go through and see if there's a film that you haven't seen before, if it piques your interest, and just sort of take a look. And yeah, there's a lot on here. Like I said, 485 films just from the 1980s that are horror specific. It's a lot to cover. But yeah, that's Letterboxd essentially, and I love it. Like I said, it's a godsend, especially for people like me who watch film a lot. It just makes sense that somebody made it. You can tell that somebody who loves film took a ton of time, a ton of money, stuff like that, and made this app for everyone to enjoy and be able to sort of log their films. Okay, so looking at my talking points for this video, another big thing that people like to sort of talk about in the film/TV area is either favorite movies or favorite TV shows. Now, this is sort of a topic that I don't mind talking about, but it's super, super hard because there are so many films, so many TV shows out there, and everyone has opinions and everyone likes certain things. So you got to sort of put that into the mix when bringing up the subject of, or bringing up the question, what's your favorite film/television show of all time? It's easier for me to sort of maybe narrow it down to like a certain decade. Like, what's your favorite TV show from the 1970s, or favorite film from the 60s or the 80s and stuff like that. So for me, one of my all-time favorite films is Halloween. 1978, John Carpenter's just absolute legendary film that he made. It's an absolute classic. Which, God forbid, if you haven't seen Halloween, I mean, I don't know what you're doing. But it's one of those films where it not only impacted the horror genre overall, but it sort of just affected a lot of... It didn't just affect people who like horror movies. It affected sort of a wider range of people, which is really, really good to do. It's always nice when a film comes out and somebody who absolutely just doesn't like horror movies says that they didn't mind it. It's always a win when you hear that type of stuff. And with Halloween, I can't remember the budget of the film. It was considered a indie film for the budget that they had, and I believe it made, I don't know if it was opening weekend or just sort of overall when it was in the theaters in 78, but it made about 50 million, which led to John Carpenter, because studios like making money. I mean, who doesn't like making money? Since Halloween made 50 million, the studio's like, oh, hey, John, this movie did really well. We want to make another one, and we're going to give you a bigger budget to work with. And so he made, after Halloween, I think he made Escape from New York. After Halloween, I think that's where he got like a big sort of chunk of money to work with. Kurt Russell was in the film, so bigger actors, stuff like that. And I'm not saying that Halloween didn't have big actors, but at the time when it came out, Jamie Lee Curtis, like, Halloween was Jamie Lee Curtis's first feature film, I believe. But overall, like, her first big breakout, along with, the other actors that were in that film. And so John Carpenter made Escape from New York. It did pretty good. I don't remember if there was a movie between Escape from New York and The Thing, but then he made The Thing. And John Carpenter, if you watched any of his films, even like a handful, you'll kind of notice that he likes simplistic type things in his films. So, like, any way to save money, it seemed like John Carpenter wanted to do that. I mean, who wouldn't? But especially with him. So he scored his very first like short film, which, sidebar, he won an Academy Award for in 1970. It was a student film. But he made the music for that film. And then he made the music for Halloween. And he even said in an interview, like, he noticed that, not only am I directing, but I'm also composing music. And so that's sort of a grab, like, sort of an attention thing to say, like, hey, check out this film. The director is really good, and he also did the score for the film. It just sort of adds an extra layer of, I guess, professionalism and showing how dedicated he really is to his film and stuff like that. And his composing is great. The Halloween score, I mean, everyone knows the Halloween theme song, and it's It's incredible. But yeah, Halloween 1978, my favorite film of probably all time. I mean, it's really hard for me to put a film at number one, but I'd have to say Halloween is right there, sitting at number one pretty comfortably. Favorite TV show? That's a different story. But I will have to say, just right off the top of my head, The Sopranos. And I think a lot of people will agree with me on that one. I think the big two or three, I think the big three for television shows is The Sopranos, Breaking Bad, and The Wire. Those are like the big three favorite all-time or TV shows that everyone just unanimously says, yes, it's a great TV show. Anyone who hasn't seen it needs to watch it. You can also maybe throw in like Game of Thrones, stuff like that. I think a lot of people really enjoy Game of Thrones because of the budget that show had. Every episode, looked like a multi-million-dollar film, which it essentially was. I think towards the end of Game of Thrones, they were, spending between $5 and $10 million an episode, which is absolutely insane. There's films that, like the very first Saw film that came out in 2004, it had a budget of like $1.1 million, maybe less than that. That's all they had. And here's Game of Thrones with one episode in a season of, 14, 16 episodes. And one episode is costing them, over $2 million, which is crazy. And I think that's why people love Game of Thrones, because it looks like a movie when you're watching an episode. It's only, a 50, 60-minute long episode, but it looks like a film. And, it also helps that the acting was great, stuff like that. But The Sopranos really brought things to the table. HBO always had such a good thing with their company, and that was they didn't have to censor. So you could have swearing, you could have sex, you could have nudity, all that stuff in your TV shows on HBO, and it was no big deal because it was on HBO. And on top of that, HBO, like I mentioned with Game of Thrones, some of their shows they put money into. HBO is willing. I don't know if they are still today, but back during The Sopranos and into like Game of Thrones days, they were willing to take a chance. And every time it seems like HBO has taken a chance, the show has just exceeded everyone's expectations. The Sopranos it's just incredible. It is sort of the first television show to have like a main character be a anti-hero. If you don't know what an anti-hero is, it's a pretty simple concept. It's where the main person that you're watching is essentially a bad person, but yet very likable. So, like, Tony Soprano was a very bad guy. He killed people, wasn't nice to people, stuff like that. But when you're watching the show, since you're watching mainly Tony Soprano and he's talking stuff like that, you sort of side with him because, he's got a good two sides. He's got a good bad side and he's got a really good good side as well. And it seems like good always sort of outshines bad in television shows. Maybe not necessarily the case with the news, but with TV shows. If something good is happening, typically it's gonna maybe outweigh something bad. It depends though. But Tony Soprano was the first like big anti-hero, and so that really sort of carved and paved a path for television shows. And then also just the overall like New Jersey mobster and stuff like that. Everyone loves a good mob film or mob TV show. And it could be with bad actors and stuff like that. People are still gonna enjoy it. I mean, look at The Godfather Part 1 and 2. People consider I consider The Godfather one of the greatest films of all time. I won't deny it. And the sequel, I mean, the sequel is just as good, if not better, than the first one. And so that's a mob film. And like I said, people love mob films. I don't know why, but it's very entertaining to watch a good mob film or TV show. So those are sort of my favorite TV shows. I guess I could delve into just for a couple minutes like animated stuff, because animated TV was a big part of my life growing up. First cartoon I can remember is Rugrats. I absolutely loved watching Rugrats as a child. My parents remember at Queers Day, me, I loved Rugrats. My sister, who's older than me by, I think, 7 years, she watched a lot of Barney and stuff like that. So, yeah, but as I got older, I watched a lot of, like the Angry Beavers and Hey Arnold and, stuff that was on Nickelodeon that was animated. The Wild Thornberries is another one. If you remember that show, you know what's up. And animated shows were great. And then once I was about 8 or 9, maybe a little bit younger, not 100%, is when I started watching Adult Swim. And with Adult Swim came some of my favorite animated shows. Family Guy, Futurama, American Dad. All these TV shows were just great. Aqua Teen Hunger Force is another one. The Boondocks. All these great TV shows that are animated were on Adult Swim. And I think it has to do with the fact that a lot of them were TV 14. So they had, maybe a few light swears, but more adult content, which was always sort of fun to, watch. Like, ooh, I'm 7, 8 years old and I'm watching, a show that is meant for someone 6 years older than me. But then again, rating systems are kind of stupid when it comes to age. And things have changed. Like, I remember back when I was younger, you couldn't say shit on TV. Now you can. Most television shows, they don't blur out shit. They still blur, or they still bleep out, fuck and, all those profane swear words, stuff like that. But Adult Swim was just, I absolutely loved Adult Swim, and it was one of the television channels that I really grew up on a lot. But yeah, that's sort of just a little taste of some animated stuff that I have watched in my days of watching film and television. Okay, so I got one more talking point I sort of want to touch on, and that is my favorite genre of film. And that genre, if you haven't guessed already, is the horror genre. The horror genre to me is very important because for as long as I can remember, which would be over 20 years, I've always loved horror movies. Whether it be bad ones, good ones, monster movies, certain subgenres within the horror genre. I mean, I love it all. I love everything about horror in the best way possible. I respect the filmmakers who make these films, the practical effects, I mean, everything. It's just, it's the genre that I feel like everyone loves, but a lot of critics are like, whatever about. Um, and I think people like horror movies just because who doesn't like getting a little bit of a scare every once in a while? Like, come on. You gotta have a scare every once in a while. Otherwise, what's the point? But yeah, horror is great. I absolutely love it so much. I have watched horror movies from the 1920s all the way to today. I have probably seen at least one horror movie from every decade since the 1920s. 1920s, right off the top of my head, I can think of Nosferatu. The 30s, Frankenstein. I mean, a lot of the monster movies. Same with the 40s. A lot of different monster movies. 50s, it's sort of transitioned into more sci-fi. And so there's maybe like Godzilla or, like Attack of the 50-Foot Woman or, stuff like that where it's sort of out of the realm of real, which was already a thing back in the 20s, but it sort of just changed to more of a sci-fi kind of thing. And I think it had a lot to do with right after the Second World War, advancements were sort of happening with technology, and one of the big ones was I think 1948 was the crash in Roswell, and so that sort of spawned the alien trope and sort of spaceships and outer space and stuff like that. And then the crash at Roswell was 1948, so I guess the late 40s into the 50s and even into the 60s and even today. Sci-fi is still a huge thing. And I love when they add horror into sci-fi because, I mean, space is a scary place. Alien has the best movie tagline. You can't scream, or no one can hear you scream in space. Or I think that's how it's something like that. You know what I'm talking about. But then the 1960s rolled around. You had a lot of Hitchcock in the 60s. I think Hitchcock dominated horror in the 60s. But then you also had sort of the late 60s started coming out with religious type stuff. So a lot of demonic things were happening. Rosemary's Baby, I think, was sort of the big one that kicked off the religion and sort of demonic type based films. And then the 70s. So me, for we'll just go specifically horror. I'd say the best decade for horror was probably the 1970s. The 70s had a lot of great things in the media going for it, but horror for me in the 70s was perfect. I absolutely adore horror movies from the 80s. I can't get enough of them. I love a good campy horror film. But let's talk about the 70s real quick. The 70s had, like The Exorcist, Black Christmas, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Halloween. The Hills Have Eyes. There's so many different types of subgenres within the horror genre that came out in the 1970s that are just great films. that it's really hard to pick and choose. So I would say if you're starting to dip your toes in to the horror genre, I would suggest going to the 1970s for good horror films to kind of get yourself acquainted with the genre. The 1980s, great decade, like I said, for horror. The 80s was a lot of campy based horror films. You had some big icons come out of the 80s, like Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees were the two big ones. And then Chucky in 1988 sort of came into the mix as well. But I would say if you want a good either campy horror movie or just like a really just not taken too seriously, very fun horror film, find one from the 80s because there's a ton. Not all of them are good. I may warn you on that, but like I said, just a lot of fun with the 80s. The 1990s, oof. I'd say the only big thing in the 90s was in 96 when Scream came out. I think 2 years prior, Wes Craven's New Nightmare had come out and was very meta and stuff like that and over the top in that aspect. And New Nightmare was sort of Wes Craven's, like, I guess, dry run for Scream. And since he saw that New Nightmare was a success, from what I know personally, Scream was just an absolute bombshell of a hit in the mid to late 90s. I mean, everyone really enjoyed Scream because it was meta and it was not just a horror film, but it was also funny. And people like that. People like a good mix of polar opposites. Like horror and comedy, they're opposites, but if you do it right and you put horror and comedy together, you can have a really, really good film, and that's where you get Scream. Then there was films that followed Scream that sort of did the same formula, like I Know What You Did Last Summer, and Valentine also did that. Valentine's sort of a lesser-known horror film, but it's essentially following sort of the same formula as Scream. And then I believe 1990, I think it was 98 or 99, the big one came out, the Blair Witch Project. So found footage was a thing. I think close to 20 years prior, Cannibal Holocaust was the first big film to really make found footage into, I guess, what it still is today. And found footage is basically footage that looks real but is not, and is acted out but is acted as if it is a real thing that's happening. So it's a lot of hand cam work and stuff like that. But the Blair Witch carved a path perfectly because of the marketing. The marketing back in the day, since it was 98 and 99, the internet was in its infancy, but the people who had computers and were on the internet, the team over behind Blair Witch, as far as marketing, what they did was they made missing persons posters for the main people in Blair Witch and basically made it seem like they were real people and they were actually missing. And then when the film came out, if people had seen those things on the internet, they were like, oh my gosh, like this is absolutely terrifying. And a lot of people would argue and say that the Blair Witch is one of the scariest films ever. And I don't blame them. It's the first time I saw it, I was very scared. I'd say even still today, if I were to watch it this afternoon, I'd still probably get a little bit scared because it's It's a very simple film. It's just a few people going out into the woods to check out an urban legend, and things go bad. It's very simple in its concept because, like, there's parts in the film where, like, one morning they wake up, they unzip their tents, they go out, and there's just piles of rocks, just random piles of rocks everywhere. It's a very simple concept. Just off camera when you're not filming, just take piles of rocks and put them everywhere, and then just film it as if it's the craziest thing ever. And it worked. It worked so well. The Blair Witch, I don't even know how much money they filmed or they had. It wasn't a lot, but it made a huge profit. But yeah, I think I'll stop there. I'll stop at the 90s as a decade. I'll probably talk about the 2000s and 2010s in a later video. But the last thing I sort of want to touch on when it comes to film and stuff like that is sort of what I look for in a good film. I'd say the number one thing I look for is a good script. Dialogue is everything. Depending on the sort of mood of the film, you can either have a ton of dialogue and it can work very, very well, or you can have a film with not a lot of dialogue and it works great. Films that have less dialogue are going to be harder to appeal to the masses, because if it's just a casual person watching a film where there's not a lot of dialogue, they're going to be like, it's kind of boring. But the reason why certain films don't have a lot of dialogue is because they're telling the story through visuals. So typically a light dialogue film is going to have a lot of great visuals to sort of offset and make the film really good. And yeah. And then the other thing I really look for in a good film is, me personally, camera work. If you have a good cinematographer, then you're in for a good film. Like, if I see that Roger Deakins did the cinematography for a film, I don't give a shit what the film is about. I'm going to watch it because Roger Deakins did all the camera work, and he's one of, if not the best cinematographer. Especially modern day, he's the best. Like I said, could be one of the best ever. It's hard to argue with that. But those are the two main things: is script and cinematography. And then I guess the third thing is if a film has an original score and it's good. I absolutely love any film that has an original score and the score is good. It's a good film, no matter what. The number one film I can think of is It Follows from 2014, maybe 2013, something like that. The artist Disasterpeace did the score for It Follows, and it is incredible. It's not my favorite, but as far as like an overall from beginning to end, I'd say it's one of my favorite scores to hear, because Disasterpeace did it perfect. He had just the right mix of heavy and light sounds throughout the film that make it just that much more scary. Stuff like that. But yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed this first, I guess, episode of Film Talk. I really enjoyed talking for this 50 minutes. I absolutely enjoy talking about film. These videos, I feel like, are going to be just a blast to do because, like I said, I just like talking about film and TV. It can be whatever it wants to be, and I'll enjoy it. I will mention these episodes are not only going to be uploaded just whenever I decide to film one. So there's no schedule on these. They'll just kind of be uploaded, whenever I have the time, and I got plenty of time. So there's going to be a decent amount of them throughout the next few weeks and stuff like that. What I would really appreciate is a thumbs up on this video, and more importantly than a thumbs up, please comment down below telling me what you want me to talk about as far as film. It can be just about anything from comedy to horror to foreign to talking about certain directors, certain actors, whatever it may be. Throw it out there. I will look at the comments. I try to interact, or I do interact with every single comment, even if it's just a thumbs up. If I thumbs up your comment, it means that I read it. Even if I didn't thumbs up it, I read every single comment that comes to my videos because I like seeing a sense of community with my videos, and I appreciate it a lot. If you guys enjoy this type of stuff, consider subscribing. It's 100% free, and you can unsubscribe at any time. But I wouldn't suggest doing that because I think you're going to be here for a while. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this very first Film Talk video, and I will see you guys in the next one.